I was born down in Cornwall in the West Country of England in 1955. As a little boy, my mother always said that I was as obstinate as a cartload of monkeys. I was also paralysed by shyness. My father was an architect who suffered from Asperger's, and we lived a very structured life of routine. Maybe this contributed to the extraordinary events that were about to occur. In 1968, I went to boarding school and soon became the centre of violent poltergeist activity. Heavy beds were moved, knives, light bulbs and other objects were sent flying through the air. Showers of pebbles and pools of water manifested. Strange lights appeared on walls. At one point, I was actually sent to the local psychiatric hospital for a day-long assessment. Perhaps not surprisingly, it didn't help. Eventually, I found that I could stop the poltergeist activity by engaging in what I later discovered was called automatic writing. I was one day writing an essay at school. My pen was poised just above the paper. I couldn't think what to write next, when suddenly it was as if something had taken my hand and I began writing, handwriting that I wasn't familiar with, a message that appeared to be from, whether you want to call it a spirit, whether it's from my unconscious mind or whatever. But then, for several days afterwards, there was no more poltergeist activity. Later on, I discovered that if I focused on the name of a deceased artist, I was able to draw in their style, in spite of the fact that I had no artistic ability of my own. Aubrey Beardsley, Albrecht Dürer, Picasso, Thomas Rowlandson, Paul Klee, and here's an old piece of film where I was actually producing an automatic drawing. There were many others, sometimes of artists that maybe weren't so well known. In 1974, a year after I'd left school, I underwent 3 weeks of tests in Toronto with 30 leading scientists, including Nobel Prize winner Professor Brian Josephson, who said, "We are dealing with a new kind of energy." Tests carried out by psychiatrist Dr. Joel Whitten found that I was producing a brainwave pattern that had never been seen before. It was originating from a dormant or inactive part of the brain. Interestingly, it was the oldest and most primitive area of the brain. Maybe these were abilities we all once possessed. Later that year, 1974, my first book, The Link, was published. It described the events that had occurred around me. My first television appearance was on The Frost Interview on BBC television. It was a live show, and my energy caused havoc in the studio with electrical equipment. We had to restart the show 4 times, and it was going out live. The next day, the press reported that David Frost was, in quotes, reduced to a gibbering jelly by a teenage psychic. The British and the international media seized on my story after that night of the Frost interview. I travelled the world promoting The Link. The publicity was just unrelenting and became increasingly sensational. I appeared on TV chat shows all over the world and on the Russell Harty show in this country. The Link was eventually translated into over 20 languages and went on to sell over 1 million copies. I grew increasingly tired of the unending publicity, and even the satirical magazine Private Eye made me their great bore of today. In 1977, in search of inspiration and direction, I left it all behind and travelled to India. Whilst there, high in the Himalayas, I had the most remarkable transcendent experience. It guided me to a path of healing. On returning from India, I was then tested by scientists in laboratories in the USA and Britain. I successfully influenced different biological targets in test tubes and petri dishes. These included blood cells, enzymes, seeds, mold samples, and cancer cells. One thing was for sure, these results could not be explained away by faith, placebo, or psychological factors. After numerous newspaper and magazine articles about my healing work in the laboratory, people began to approach me asking for private healing sessions. It was something I'd never done. In 1985, BBC Television made a documentary which once again created huge interest in my new healing work. In another experiment in the late 1970s, I was photographed by scientists with a Polaroid camera. As I began to meditate, a circle of light started to appear around me. My hands were really tingling, and in a third photograph, I was almost completely obscured by the light. By the fourth photograph, with a new Polaroid film, I'd simply disappeared. I then meditated, imagining a ball of light, which again was caught on film. Holding someone else's hand and trying to transfer the energy to them, the energy appeared above their head. I was the first, and I believe the only healer, to address doctors at the Royal Society of Medicine. I was invited to dinner at Buckingham Palace. Lord Snowdon photographed me for Vogue magazine. I was doing healing demonstrations, workshops and healing circles around the world by now. In 1995, Sir David Frost, with whom I'd worked 20 years previously, invited me to co-present with him the hit ITV show Beyond Belief. On the show, I always did a mind-body exercise and a live healing demonstration in the studio. This lady's sense of taste and smell was restored in just 10 minutes after more than 20 years. Television, it seemed, couldn't get enough of me, and another BBC documentary now followed, Order from Chaos. Thousands of people now join my live healing events. I often worked with my good friends, Robert Godfrey and Tim Wheater. Nowadays, the energies are stronger than ever before. I spend my time seeing patients privately and also holding healing circles where I'm working with groups of patients. Sometimes on the healing circles, I'm still joined by my old friend Tim Wheater. I also now work very closely and extensively with Anita Ridley, a hugely talented and gifted composer and a multi-instrumentalist. A lot of our work is done for online meditations. The music I also, however, use for my healing circles and for private healing sessions. Let's just go out with a snatch of one of our compositions, Rivers of Light.
Let's hold on to each other, hold on to the healing. We are safe, flowing, reaching out, floating light, gently rocking our hearts, connected, beating as one.